Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gregory Holtz, Diversity Inclusion Liaison, and today's Diversity Speaks series is Don't Believe Everything You Hear, My Positive American Experience. This is a recorded session, so please be respectful and place yourself on mute during the presentation. If anyone needs captions for the presentation, it'll be accessed by pressing the More tab, which is in the upper right-hand corner, then Language and Speech, and finally turn on live speech. If you have any questions, please place them in the chat and we'll try to address them at the end of this presentation. Now, for opening remarks on behalf of the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, Chad Dion Lassiter, let me introduce to you Special Assistant Zulay Rojas. S.A. Rojas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gregory. Welcome, everyone, to this virtual space. Thank you so much for joining us today as part of our Diversity Speak series. We are so honored and humbled to have our guest speaker, Amer Al Fayadh. We welcome you to this virtual space and thank you so much for taking the time to really share your experience and talk a little bit about what it's been like for you, especially with the turmoil and everything that's going on overseas. But what is your experience here in America? Here at the beloved community in Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, we welcome different perspectives, different viewpoints, and we welcome and are open to diversity. So please enjoy, be respectful of our speaker. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat. But we welcome you to this space. And on behalf of our executive director, who is presently recording a PHRC Speaks on PCM, which you can catch as a part of our fair housing series. He's with our director of enforcement right now and couldn't be with us. But I sent him and all of you on his behalf salutations. And let's enjoy what we have in store. Back to you, Gregory.
Thank you, S.A. Rojas. Amir is the founder and CEO of Communication Essentials LLC, a consultation and language services company. After resettling in the United States in 2010, Amir worked for a nonprofit where he had the privilege of working with people from over 30 countries. He's also a certified healthcare interpreter with over 15 years of experience in interpretation and translation. He has a strong community and ethical focus and believes supporting others is the best way to empower the community. Please help me welcome Amir. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Of course, I wanted to start with saying that I'm very good at making mistakes, and I'm very good at learning from those mistakes. So in the past 13, 14 years of my life here in the United States, I was challenged uh, in many different ways, and those challenges uh, always help me to become a better person and become a better professional in the work that I do. I worked in refugee resettlement and immigration services for many, many years. During that time, I got to meet people and I got to walk alongside of people uh, trying to access services in our new community. And through that, I learned about services that are available for us as a community, and I learned about the challenges that are people facing when they are trying and attempting to access services and engage in our community. So today we will be talking about the path to welcome. Next slide, please. On this presentation, we're going to talk about what challenges that people face when they come here and they are learning about their new community, how we as professionals and as a community manage cross-cultural expectations in order for us to create meaningful uh, and engaging and inclusivity and participation. Um, in your work, I want you to think creatively and I invite you to think from different perspective when it comes to this topic. Think about people that might seek your services as a clients. Think about people that are seeking employment within your organization or within your entity, and also think about uh, individuals that could engage your organization or your entity in different ways, and how they can find meaningful engagement when working with your agency or organization. Next slide. And I wanted to start with a quick story, a story of a lady that I had the privilege of working with back in 2017. And at that time, I was a case manager, and I was prepared to answer all the questions that they may have. People, when they first arrive to the United States, they want to ask you everything about their new community. They want to learn everything about their new community. So I come prepared to tell them everything that I know about the United States. And uh, usually it's an interesting interesting but meaningful meeting. That first meeting that people will remember forever, and they will say, Amer, I remember that you told me this when we first met. So I was sitting there at their house, drinking coffee and chatting with the dad about when we're going to be registering the kids in school, when we're going to be taking them to look for jobs, when we're going to apply for documentations, when we're going to apply for different services that they qualify for, English classes, etc., etc. And the mom spoke and said, "Are they going to treat us well?" So I looked at her and I was a little bit confused, and I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "We wear the hijab, the head covering. My daughters wear the hijab, and I'm concerned that we're not going to be treated well. Are the Americans going to treat us well?" So I sat up and I told her that me and my family been living in this community in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for many, many years. And we only received great treatment in this community. However, if herself or her daughters are concerned about anything in school, please to let us know, and we will be speaking to the administration. So she looked at me and she gave me a look that uh, is a common look in the Middle East of people that don't want to challenge your perspective. Is, I don't believe you, but out of respect, I'm going to respect what you just said, and I'm going to stop, asking questions. Fast forward a few months later, I was sitting at their house, talking about their progress and talking about the next steps, and she spoke. To give you a little bit of context, the lady that uh, usually I had conversations with her husband, detailed conversation with her. I only had brief conversations, greetings, nothing more than that. So when she spoke, she said, I believed you. I believed what you said a few months ago. I now call my relatives in the Middle East and tell them do not believe the news. Americans are good. And she said, when I walk down the street, people look at me and they smile. They look at me and they say hello. Although I don't speak the language, but I believe that they mean me well and they mean well toward my family, and they've been helpful. So with this story, I wanted to bring to your attention a change in perspective. People come to their new country and they have preconceived ideas. They have expectations that could be realistic or could be the opposite. And our goal and our responsibility as a community to work with everyone from an agency standpoint and also from a community standpoint to work with everyone to make sure that the expectations are realistic and true expectations to what is out there. Next slide, please. So in order for us to dive in a little bit deeper into this conversation. And feel free to leave your questions in the chat. Feel free to, if you have the option to unmute yourself, I welcome questions throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions, feel free to stop me and ask me a question. And for the monitors at this presentation, please, if you see a question that I can't respond to during the presentation, I will be more than happy to take on that question. But to understand the history of participation, and I'm speaking from immigrants and refugee perspective, but some of those concepts can be applied and can be broadened to include different populations that you may be encountering or you may be working with. But to give you a little bit of information about my background as someone who comes from the Middle East, from a country called Iraq, we were told from a young age by our parents and of course by our trusted adults not to engage in politics and to always give government officials the opinion that they want to hear. Because if you ultimately say something that will be looked at as a criticism to the government or looked at as you know, minimizing or showing that you are being ungrateful to I see that there is are we good on the presentation? I see that there is some unmuted mic, I believe, in the background. So anyway, yeah, when it comes to that, so like when it comes to participation, you know, people are accustomed to from their previous experience is not to share their opinion and not to share their true thinking of the situation in front of them. And that could reflect on their life here in the United States. When it comes to living in a new country, sometimes, you know, sometimes people prefer not to speak of issues of discrimination that they are faced with when they are trying to access housing, as example. In the beginning, when I first came, I went and I looked at multiple places, but I was told to go away from few of those places because I did not look American, and that's a sign of discrimination. But in my situation, I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to say something about those situations because I didn't know how the system operated and I didn't know where to go to share that information or to file a complaint, etc., etc. So with that in mind, I will be speaking of some of the projects. And next slide, please. I will be speaking of some of the projects that I worked on in the past in Pennsylvania and what challenges that we faced as we worked on those projects. So some of the project that I worked on is census participation and census education, and also the complete count work that we did in Lancaster County. And we were successfully able to reach over 2,000 individuals in 18 different languages through our connections and through the networks that we built to be able to inform them about the census and why the census is important. Of course, you know, one of the challenges that we faced while we're doing that work is trust. And people were concerned about why they should be giving their information to the government, why they should be participating in the census, and if their information will be kept safe, and what is the purpose of the census. And again, given the historical context, a lot of individuals that come to the United States And give myself as an example, in Iraq, the government keeps a tab on everyone, and they want to make sure that that they know everything about you. So the more information you have out there, the more they have control over you, and people are scared of that. We also worked on comprehensive planning support, and we supported the Lancaster City work toward the comprehensive plan and the implementation of the comprehensive plan, and we were able to work with individuals in their mother tongue. We had sessions in Swahili, we had sessions in Arabic, and we had session in Haitian Creole, trying to help people understand the importance of the uh, comprehensive planning and why they should be participating in the comprehensive planning and giving feedback. The other challenges, as we do and we did a lot of the work that we did in Lancaster and beyond with different organizations and different governmental entities, is people are reluctant to give their feedback given the historical context. Uh, they don't want to sound like they are criticizing the government or criticizing an entity or an agency that might represent the government. And in a lot of countries, either you have the private sector or you have uh, the governmental sector, and you don't have the third sector, which is the nonprofit sector. So every time people engage with organizations, they make the assumption that every organization that they are engaged with, if it's not a business, it's a government entity or associated with government. Thus, they avoid potentially giving their honest feedback or giving their honest opinion if they don't have uh, pre-built trust. And this is something that we're going to be talking about later on how to build trust, how to build the bridges in order for you to have everyone's voice heard around the table. When it comes to discrimination, when it comes to access to services, when it comes to access to employment, on how people present themselves to avoid being associated with something that might view as a weakness or lessen their chances of getting employment and employment opportunities. So I wanna ask you a quick question. What are the some of the challenges that you've witnessed in your work? You're the experts. You do the work day to day, and I'm curious to learn from you. What are the challenges that you've seen in participation and populations that you work with, or populations that you try to engage or attempt to engage in your work? What are some of those challenges that you faced as a way to define opportunities? This is collective learning, and anything that you may share that might benefit somebody else to think about and also to implement within their work. But what are some of those challenges when it comes to engaging the community? And we will give it a few seconds to see uh, if we have some participants. Thank you very much. And I see a response in the chat, and feel free to unmute yourself or add it to the chat. I see a response from one of the participants. Says a sense of hopelessness, lack of trust, fear of retaliation. Perfect. Thank you very much. And yes, these are great answers, and anger or frustration. And as I mentioned earlier, yes, that's great. Sometimes understanding the complexity of the U.S. system, we come Most of the immigrants and refugees that come to the United States come from centralized government operations, and they come to the United States. Uh, they come to the United States, and they find it difficult to understand the just jurisdictions and who's responsible for what, and how to be able to approach or reach the correct entity that could support them in their need or in the challenge that they have. Uh, and understanding, of course, like resources and having legal representation. Sometimes legal representation requires having financial means, and if people don't have the financial means to find the correct representation, they might end up being unjustly uh, you know um judged due to lack of present representation or lack of understanding of what's available for them. So earlier years of in my earlier years of life here in the United States, you know, uh, coming from a country like Iraq, in my employment, I found it difficult to give my opinion, especially if my opinion oppose my supervisor's opinion or have something that might not agree 100% with my supervisor opinion. It's something that uh, is not acceptable back in Iraq and some other countries. It's not acceptable that you give an opinion that is opposed to your supervisor. So it took me a time to understand that I can share my opinion. I can learn how to share my opinion and build it in a way that it's preserve respect to everyone involved and also give me the space to voice my concern about services that we're providing to clients or about changes in services that we are doing within the organization. Same thing for my clients. I'm going to be, shortly sharing about a project that I worked on in the past to get feedback from clients. Thinking about creative ways of getting feedback from clients without making them feel that they are uh, under a magnified glass and that they need to give their opinion and they need to be direct in giving opinions, because not everybody is comfortable with that approach. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges that I faced as I worked on this project, which was working with the Lancaster County Chiefs of Police Association and the DA office on police community engagement opportunity. And the idea of this project started with me wanting a car seat checked uh, because we were expecting a baby at that time, and I wanted a car seat checked. So my wife contacted our local police department, and the sergeant told her to come on a Sunday because there will be time for them to work on the car seat and making sure that the car seat is installed correctly. So she forwarded me the email. I took the vehicle. At that time, I was wearing the traditional Arabic Middle Eastern head covering. And when I arrived to the police station, I'm a person that is comfortable being in governmental agencies, being in spaces where I'm talking to government officials or officials of uh, uh, organizations in our community. So I'm comfortable in those spaces. But when I arrived alone to the police station, I noticed that there was no one outside, and I didn't feel comfortable getting out of my vehicle. And I said, I'm not sure, I feel comfortable. I look Middle Eastern. And again, this is my perceived, it's a reality, but it's my perceived reality that because I look Middle Eastern, I might not be treated correctly. So I had that fear in my heart. So I went on and I want you to pay attention to this because one of the participants mentioned language access, language justice, and also being able to speak English proficiently or understand technology. To add to that, understanding technology, when to access information. So I went back to the email. I found the officer's name, but I couldn't find a phone number attached to the signature. And I went on the internet. I looked for the police department and I found the phone number and I called. So when I called, of course, I ran through the options and I chose dial by name directory, and I was able to get the name of the officer from the email. And luckily, I was able like to find her name, and I called her, and she answered the phone. If she didn't answer the phone, I would have probably like left and went back home without getting the car seat checked. But she answered the phone. She told me, "Come to the back. I'm gonna open the gate. You can come in, and I can check the vehicle for you." So I went to the back. I got that car seat checked. I felt confident to do that because like she gave me the instructions on how to proceed from there. I went, I got the car seat checked. We had a lovely conversation. She told me about the work that they do at the local police station. She told me about her retirement plans. She told me about like other things that were meaningful, and they were engaging and allowed me to engage with her as a person and learn about her as a person and also her work that she's doing in the community. And that's very important, building trust and building relationship, professional relationship, and allowing people to see you as a person, allow them to open up to you and allow them to open up to giving their opinion or sharing their concerns with full transparency with you. I went home, and on my mind, I said I need to do something about it. And again, like I'm a person that has education, has English language proficiency, and also engaged in the community. So the story might be different for somebody else because their resources are limited. So I reached out back to the police station and I told them uh, I do trainings and consulting for living, and I would love to come to the police station and work with our local officers to give them a little bit more information about the refugees and immigrants that live in our local community. We have a very robust immigrant and refugee communities here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I wanted them to know about who lives in the community, because if people need services of the police, they are less likely to engage the police, and they are less likely to go to the police station and ask for services because of their fear, because of previous trauma, and because of other aspects that might hinder their ability to engage the police. So I did the training, uh, and the police officers at my local department enjoyed the time that we spent together, and that led to me working with the DA office and also working with the Lancaster County Police Chiefs Association on expanding the work, on expanding the community engagement work that we did. Because the idea is to build trust outside emergency situation. Because when officers are dealing with an emergency, they need to deal with the emergency. They don't have time for conversations, or they don't have time to engage uh, at a less intense level. And when I reached out to my local community leaders and I mentioned that I have this project that I'm working on with the police and I would love for them to come and join me. I talked to the first person and he said, "No, I'm busy." I talked to the second person and he said the same thing. "I'm busy. I'm not going to be able to do it." Third person, same thing. Fourth person told me I'm busy. And I said, "Hold on a second. Every time we have conversations, you tell me that you would like to engage in the community. You would like for your culture, for your community to be known by our larger community." His answer was, "But Amer, these are the police." And I said, "Okay, and so what?" And he said, "No, I don't want to go to the police. these are the police, and I don't want to engage in the police. So this is someone who present themselves as a leader in their community, but they also they represent the fears of their community. So imagine someone needing help from the police, whether it's a domestic violence situation, sexual abuse, any criminal situation, discrimination for housing or any other matters. They are less likely to engage the individuals that we should trust the most, because they fear that the police in the United States might be also similar to the police in their home country, similar to the police in Iraq, similar to the police in other countries that they come from. So that's why we did the project, and that's why we did the work, so we can open up the opportunity for the community to get to learn about the police work, and also for the police work to learn about the challenges that are people facing in our community when they are trying to find the proper resources, find the trusted individuals that can help them in navigating emergency situations and beyond. Next slide, please. So I want you to take, this is the project that I mentioned earlier. I want you to take a closer look at the picture in front of us. And I want you to, put in the chat anything that you see. What do you see? What do you see in front of you? And we will talk about the project and how we arrived to this project. Wonderful. It's a Myla said royal paint tattoo. Anybody else? What do you see in front of you? Skeleton with wings. Permanent art, houses, apartments in the back. Yes, skull with a crown and wings. All these are correct answers. But as we spoke earlier, life is about perspectives, and your perspectives, fear, your perspective is built on your previous experiences. Next slide, or next, please. It's not a witch doctor. And this project, we did this project as a way to allow our clients, and this is a creative way, to allow our clients to share their successes and to share their challenges. And by taking a camera and taking pictures of those challenges and those successes. So this client, I remember when they first were resettled in Pennsylvania, I placed them in an apartment, and the apartment was safe, clean, and a close proximity to other people that they knew. But when I came to visit them the next day, they refused to stay in the apartment and they wanted to leave. And of course, at that time, I was feeling a little bit upset because the apartment was nice and it was clean and there is no reason for them to refuse the apartment. But that was like one of the mistakes that I made. I did not give them the space to express themselves at that time. And I said, this is the apartment that we provided you with. Is it safe? They said yes. Is it clean? They said yes. And then I said, I'm not going to be able to find you a different apartment. And if you wish, you can speak to my supervisor about that. They went, they spoke to my supervisor, and my supervisor went through the same thing, asked them the same questions if the apartment is safe, clean, and asked them why they want to change the apartment. And they said, we don't like that apartment. We want to be somewhere else. Fast forward a week or two later, they stopped asking about the apartment and they stopped complaining about the apartment. And when we did this project 6 or 7 months later, he shared this picture, and he said, when we first came, we came at night, and when we arrived from the airport, it was dark. But the next day, when we opened the windows, we saw this skull and in front of us. And back home, witch doctors put a skull on their huts, and we avoid living close to them because they can harm you and they can cause damage to your family. So that's why we wanted to leave the apartment. But until somebody from our community explained that this is a tattoo shop, not to be concerned, we were living in fear, and we wanted to leave that apartment because of that tattoo shop and because of the skull. So it's a perspective, clients, especially like diverse clients, and when you work with clients from other parts of the world, they have perspectives, and they have perspectives built on previous experiences. So it's very important that you keep that in mind as you work with people and allow them the spaces to build trust with you, and also to be able to think outside the box. Why would they, as example, would they refuse a service, or why would they refuse to file a complaint, or why would they not, you know, share their concerns with full honesty with us, etc., etc. Next slide. So to just summarize of some of the challenges, uh, along with the challenges that your coworkers or co-participants mentioned, I wanted to highlight a few of them. Uh, Communication style, uh, the United States culture, and this is a generalizing statement, but of course individuals have different experiences, and I wanted to emphasize that, and they have different communication style. But in general, Americans are known to be a little bit more direct, and also uh, you know when they give their opinion, they mean what they say, and they say what they mean. As for other cultures, to give my example, like the Iraqi culture, we are a high context culture where if we feel obligated to you in any way, we might not give you no as an answer, and we might not be super direct in given the answers. It doesn't mean that we are being dishonest or being in any way deceitful, but rather it's a cultural practice that people might not give no as an answer directly, and that could impact how services work. You could agree with someone on the next steps, and they will say okay, or they will agree with you, but in reality they might not feel comfortable telling you that they are concerned about the next steps, or what are their concerns about the next step, etc., etc. Cultural and historical context, uh, it's very evident in some of the situations that I was involved in, where conflict resolution might be presented and might be dealt with based on cultural and historical understanding of conflict. I had situations where individuals uh, wanting to resolve problems according to what they learned back home, and waiting for their families and extended families to decide with them what is the best outcome for their conflict that happened here in the United States. And sometimes that can delay resolutions. And if you are involved in those situations, you might not understand why there is a delay in the resolution, but the delay could be based on getting a decision from tribal leaders, or getting a decision from family elders back home, in order for the conflict to be resolved here in the United States. Access to education, uh, sometimes, uh, and I work in the translation and interpretation work. Sometimes the text that is being shared with individuals is above their educational level. A lot of people that might not have access to education, and you present them with paperwork that they need to sign or that they need to agree on. But in reality, even if it's written in their own language, they might not be able to understand it or read it. And they feel ashamed to tell you that. You know, many refugees lack access to educational opportunities. Of course, you will meet individuals that are highly educated, but at the same time, like in refugee contexts and situations where you're not allowed to go beyond certain grade to access education, further education, and the work of the translation that we do, it's very important to keep that in mind, and also it's uh, from a legal standpoint is to keep the text within 5th to 7th grade level reading ability, so people can potentially understand it, and you give people wider access to your materials, wider access to the paperwork that you are sharing with them, so they can understand it. On access to spaces, people might not understand how to access you, how to get to you, how to find the opportunities to share their opinion. uh, and one example, if language language is a challenge, if opportunities are presented only in English, they might not have access to those opportunities. Also, if they don't have access to technology or understand how technology operates, if you advertise your events or advertise the opportunities online, they might not have access to those. And thus, you will be unintentionally excluding them from opportunities. Next step. So uh, we are getting closer to the end, and I would love to hear your questions and give enough time for questions. But one of the key components that I found, and as I mentioned in the police DA work that we've done, is the key component is building trust and building relationships. It comes before engaging them in projects. It comes, of course, it might not apply 100% to the work that you do, but there are different ways of looking at this. As example, like if you are working in uh, a certain county, you could look for the individuals, you could look for ethnic churches, you could look for ethnic worship centers, you can look for mosques, you can look for Islamic centers, you can look for individuals that represent communities, and look at building relationship, building trust with those individuals. In order for you to have a channel and to have a path to receiving feedback from the communities, understand about the themes that they are faced with or the challenges that they are faced with. And mentioning housing as an example, I've met families where they have 4 or 5 incomes, but they struggle in finding housing due to perceived notion that they might not be able to afford the rent, when they have in reality 4 or 5 incomes within the household, and they have a lot of saving, and they can certainly afford uh, paying the rent, and also afford potentially purchasing their own home if they know and if they understand how the system work, and they can access resources available for first home buyer. And sometimes, again, access to knowledge is super valuable, but people might not know how to access those. So building those relationships, building those access points, building those paths will allow you to understand what people are challenged with within your field of work. But also at the same time, building your network to be able to deal with issues not related to your work or at a higher level. I've been in situations and I've been in meeting, and someone will ask a question. The meeting will be focused on employment, but someone will ask a question about housing, and we made the mistakes of saying, well, we are talking about employment today. We're not going to be able to help you with housing. But in reality, we lost an opportunity of connecting them with a trusted partner in the community on saying, let's connect you with, and we have a great resource in Lancaster, Tenfolds. Let's connect you with Tenfolds and let them potentially assist you with your housing concern and be able to make that, warm handoff to Tenfold so they can assist them with their need. And sometimes, those opportunities are missed, or redirecting someone to go to a different organization to fill a referral or complete paperwork in order for them to come back to us and be served or be worked with within our organization, and instead of you know taking creative steps and helping them and make sure that they don't get lost into the systems that can be complicated for them to navigate on their own. Next slide. So just to reflect quickly, and I will open it up for questions. You know, celebrating the communities that we have and the cultural communities that we have. Uh, promoted Promoting like transparent communication as we engage in those communities, and as we engage before situations, emergency situations, or before situations that require us uh, to have a more deeper conversation, engaging them in a way that will be meaningful and allowing them for like to share their feedback and sharing their opinion as we build those relationships and as we foster those relationships ahead of time. Sometimes it's difficult to give your opinion when you are invited to a session and you are meeting the people for the first time, and you go into the room and you will see that a lot of people, it might be overwhelming, it might be intimidating, and you might not trust that those individuals will take your opinion seriously, etc., similar to what we said earlier. On devoting resources and creating support systems and creating connections. If you are in housing, you might need to look for resources, as example in employment, and you will be saying, yes, I might not be able to assist you at this moment, but let me look at the available resources that are available in our community and get back to you to connect you with the right resource. You might have that capacity to navigate different systems with ease, and that you could make their life a little bit easier by giving them a trusted resource where they can benefit from it. Because in return, they're going to go back and they're going to say, I went to so-and-so organization, or I engaged with so-and-so, and they were able to help me, and also they were able to refer me to a trusted resource in the community. And that is a very important part to a lot of people, because that's like building trust and building connection. And potentially next time someone has a concern about an issue that they are dealing with in their community, they will come to you and they will say, trust this organization, as they will provide you with the services that you need. Onto this, next slide, we come to an end to this presentation, but I would love to hear from you now or in the future. You have my email address there. If you have any questions, if you have any follow-up questions or needs in the future, please feel free to reach out to me. But I will open it up to questions right now and see if there is anything that I can answer for you.
I didn't
Thank you very
necessarily
much.
have a question, but I did want to echo what Amanda Martin said about cultural competency and how important it is to really have that space to allow the people that you're trying to serve to express their background so that you have a better understanding of where they're coming from. I think that's unbelievably important whenever you're interacting with people. So I'm glad you touched on that point.
Absolutely, 100%. And yes, thank you, Amanda, for giving that example. And I think by sharing examples, we only become a better community and better, better service providers because we learn from each other that way.
Stacy, do you have a question? I see your hand is up.
Yes, I do. I just had a question about how any suggestions you might have about gaining cultural competency, how you might approach that subject, because I think, you know, from having conversation and taking DEI training and learning about like the high context cultures versus low context cultures, there's always a little bit of fear of, basically engaging to learn about people who are different. So what are your suggestions on best practices?
Absolutely. So I'm going to speak of my experiences as I worked with people that were different than me, culturally, linguistically, or even, from a community practice or from a religion standpoint. Uh, given given a grace and being able to allow people to share their opinion and be able like to express themselves without concerns that they will be judged, that they will be criticized, that they will be denied services. And a simple way to put that is stating the obvious. And what I mean by that, as example, like we're working through an interpreter with a family. And if you ask a lot of interpreters, what concerns people the most, they will say their confidentiality. And even though that you might share or think it's obvious that interpreters will keep the conversation confidential, but people want to hear that. They want to hear that from you as a service provider. And by stating the obvious, saying that this conversation will be kept confidential, the interpreter on the phone, as example, if you're using phone interpretation, does not know who you are or does not know your name, and they will be keeping the conversation confidential. There are laws in the United States that protect your confidentiality, etc., etc. So taking every opportunity as an educational opportunity by stating the obvious and also by allowing them over and over by by kind of saying the obvious, allowing them to trust that you are a resource for them. And I had examples as an interpreter where people did not open up for 3 or 4 different appointments until they learned and they trusted that Amer is not going to be sharing their information outside the session. So it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. If you can engage a community, it's great because they will see you outside that situation, and when comes time for them needing your help, they will be more likely to share uh, their honest opinion or honest concern with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I just want to thank you so much for this presentation. It's really important not only to communicate in a sensitive way when approaching people of a different cultures, backgrounds, because we don't know, right? We're not familiar. And even though a person may have grown up in America, they may have a different cultural upbringing. And so just allowing ourselves to practice that sensitivity when dealing with people from different cultures is vital. I thank you so much for sharing with us to allow people the space to build trust, right? Because when you want to help someone, it can be to the point where you get too close that it may push the person back or build up a wall. So allowing that person the space, whatever that looks like, to build the trust and to earn that trust was what resonated with me of your entire presentation. So I thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just like our hearing examiner, Shihadi Cope, put in the chat. It's important to meet people where they are, always. I'll say this, I'll just share with you, I was in your motherland and I never once have been in a place that was so incredibly hot. And even in 100+ degree weather, I never once turned down that cup of tea whenever I went to visit the natives because it's a form of disrespect. And thank you so much for all the work that you do, for joining us here at the PHRC, and on behalf of our executive director. I truly do thank you for this invaluable presentation. I know that all of us will walk away from here with something new and something to actually put into practice here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. So, Amer, thank you for your time, for your presentation. I thank all of you for joining in, and you have his contact information. If you need to ask him a question offline, please do so. Reach him directly. And I also like to thank our ASL interpreter for providing the service as well. So, unless anyone else has any questions, any comments, enjoy the day, and thank you again for joining us.